It's a beautiful morning in the capital city of Abuja. Welcome to the midweek edition of Newspaper Headlines, reaching you live from the studios of the Advent Cable Network Nigeria, ACNNTV. In the dailies today, EFCC boss Magu still under investigation as Buhari converses for his replacement. And in another development, Senate passes sexual harassment bill into law. These and other stories within and around the globe are stories making the rounds. I am Rachel Ibn. We take it from here with the Blueprint newspaper, and I'll start with the lead story. Has this question: is EFCC chair Magu on his way out? The kickers: probe shows nobody above the law. This is coming from presidency source. Arrest outcome of power play at highest level. This is coming from Serap. Anti-corruption law political. This one is coming from Mogalu, and the story can be found on page 6. And we have this picture from right: Chief of Air Staff, Chief of Training and Operations, and Air Officer commanding special operatives during the Chief of Air Staff operational visit to Sokoto. This happened on Monday. NLNG dividends. Reps summon NNPC over $1.05 billion illegal withdrawals. Story can be found on page 8. The bottom strip stories: sexual harassment. Randy lecturers risks 14-year jail. This is coming from the Senate, and the story can be found on page 5. On page 13, Palm assumes duty as NCPC boss, assures on peace and transparency. Page 14, 2023, Picasures on Igbo presidency, minister tells Southeast. Allegations on misappropriated 40 billion naira, fake, frivolous. This is coming from Katsina government, and the story can be found on page 15. Below the masthead, 774,000 jobs. Executive surrenders, apologizes to NAS. All previous actions nullity. This is coming from Lawan. Keyamo kicks to approach AGF for interpretation of NDE Act. Says it's a ploy to edge him out. The story starts from the front page and it continues on page 6. On page 5, NAS salary structure illegal. This is coming from head of service. 6 stoppage of implementation. And finally, from Blueprint newspaper on page 20, federal government sources for $1.45 billion to revive Ajaokuta. Our story is on page 20. We move on to Daily Trust newspaper, and I'll take it below the masthead. Low booking as commercial flights resume today. See the story on page 6. On page 4, how Zamfara bandit masterminded doctor's murder. How tailoring gave me breakthrough. That story can be found on page 10. And the lead story: Buhari shops for Magu's replacement. The kickers: suspended EFCC chair risks prosecution. Nobody above scrutiny. This is coming from presidency. Security operatives search Magu's houses. We are watching unfolding events. This is coming from Sagi. And the picture is that of a scene of an accident that caused traffic gridlock on the Abuja-Kaduna highway at Madala in Niger State. This happened yesterday. The bottom strip stories on page 32. Gunmen kill army officer, abduct wife, murder in Kogi. Under governorship, lawmakers divided over move to impeach deputy governor. See the details on page 30. Finally, on Daily Trust newspaper, 3.4 million more Nigerians could become extremely poor. The story can be found on page 17. We'll move on to Leadership newspaper. I'll take it below the masthead. COVID-19. Federal government releases 3,789 inmates. The kickers. Khan calls for reopening of churches in states. Brazil's president tests positive for coronavirus. The story starts from the front page and it continues on page 4. The lead story on Leadership newspaper. Top police officers lobby to take over from Magu. As presidency suspends EFCC acting chairman, says his probe shows nobody is above the law. See the details on page 4. And the picture is that of the Minister of Mines and Steel Development, Managing Director Maxim Bank, and Chairperson Sea-Link Implementation Committee during the signing of Sea-Link's Implementation Committee MOU with Maxim Consortium and the Ministry of Mines and Steel in Abuja. This happened yesterday. Beside the picture, Senate passes sexual harassment bill into law. Reps seek speedy prosecution of culprits. The story can be found on page 4. Drama as Ondo Assembly serves Deputy Governor impeachment notice. The kicker, Imo lawmakers begin moves to remove Speaker. The story starts from the front page and it continues on page 6. On page 20, PMB louts outgoing Chinese ambassador over country support for Nigeria. That story is on page 20. The bottom strip story, Ajaokuta Steel Project to gulp additional 551 billion naira. Details can be found on page 13. On page 10, we'll focus on high spiritual content for national development, says new NCPC boss. Troops repel bandits' attack in Katsina, kill 46. See the story on page 2. And finally, on Leadership newspaper on page 13, UBA Group appoints Laidi Alauba as DMDs for Nigeria and Africa. Away from that, we go to Nigerian Pilots, and I'll take it below the masthead. Lecturers risk 14 years imprisonment for any sexual harassment of students. See the story on page 5. On page 10, House of Reps shuts down over fear of COVID-19 infection. The lead story, Magu suspended. Have the kickers accused of insubordination declaring 539 billion naira instead of 504 billion naira. EFCC boss may be detained for 2 months. Nobody is above the law and scrutiny. This is coming from the federal government. Insist everybody must account for his or her actions. The story can be found on page 8. Alright, the picture is that of members of the local contractors of Nigeria during their peaceful protest against federal government's delay in paying them for contracts executed for many years in various ministries, developments and agencies in Abuja. This happened yesterday. 774,000 jobs. Your directives not binding on me. Kiyamo hits NAS. See the story on page 11. Now on the bottom strip stories. Governor Diri urges Nigerian Army to operationalize FOB. Details can be found on page 9. And on page 13, Ondo Assembly serves impeachment notice on Deputy Governor. Reps probe NNPC's illegal withdrawals of 1.05 billion naira from NLNG's account. See the details on page 8. On page 6, 15 killed in fresh attack in Katsina. Why CAC withdrew Ohaneze Ndibu faction's certificate. The story can be found on page 30. And last story on Nigerian Pilots. Nigeria's inflation will average 12.2% in 2020, says PwC. See the details on page 6. New Telegraph is next. I'll take it from the top above the masthead. Travelers take to the air as flights resume. The kicker of AAN warns passengers of delay at airports as NCCA suspends airlines license, grounds 15 aircraft. The story starts from the front page and it continues on page 5. On page 25, AFDB, coronavirus crisis may push 49.2 million Africans into poverty. Below the masthead, Wike Town's Ganduje says, I'm not dollar you can isolate. The story can be found on page 2. On page 5, Assembly begins under Deputy Governor's impeachment process. Over 600 firms bid for 57 marginal oil fields. This is coming from DPR, and the story can be found on page 3. On page 4, CAN demands immediate reopening of churches nationwide. The lead story on New Telegraph. Presidency on EFCC chairs probe. Magu not above the law, says allegations too weighty to be ignored. Spent second night in FCID detention. Police search embattled cops Abuja resident. See the details on page 3. Beside the picture is an update. COVID-19 global cases. 11,867,906. Global recovery. 6,826,936. Global debt. 544,141. And below the picture, 774,000 job slots. Keyamo adamant, Ngigi apologizes to NAS. Minister, I won't surrender program. And this is coming from the Senate. NDE will implement recruitment. See the story on page 4. And last story from New Telegraph newspaper. Sleeping problems in babies increase risks of mental disorder. That story is on page 6. We pause here to observe a short break. When we return, newspaper headline continues with more. Please stay tuned.
Why do we fall ill? Is it possible to stay without falling ill? Is God interested in our health? Can we get access to cheaper health anywhere? Do you want tips on how to stay healthy? Then join me, Angela Weze, on Healthwatch every Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. with repeat broadcasts on Thursday at 2 p.m. and Saturday at 1:30 p.m. as health experts provide answers to your questions on how to remain healthy physically, mentally, socially and spiritually here on. God bless you.
Nice to know that you're still there. Let us look at the recipe of the dailies. I'll take it from here with this day newspaper from the lead story. Magu's travel persists as presidential investigation enters 4th week. The kickers. Panel recommends his suspension. Security agents search residence. Detain him at FCID. Presidency says EFCC boss not above probe. The story starts from the front page and it continues on page 3. Your dollar will fail in Edo, Wike tells Ganduje. Izeyamu will win, Kano governor insists. The story starts from the front page and it continues on page 9. We have this picture of the vice president tagged ruminating on the economy. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, during the virtual meeting of the Economic Sustainability Committee in Abuja. This happened yesterday. And on page 5, Ondo Assembly begins removal of Deputy Governor. Our story is on page 5. We move up above the masthead. UBA appoints Deputy Managing Directors for Nigeria and Africa. The kicker, Okeke Executive Director retires August 1st. The story starts from the front page and it continues on page 3. And last story on this day newspaper, with 381 naira to a dollar exchange rate adjustment, federal government, states get more cash. See the details on page 8. We'll move to Nigerian Tribune and I'll take it from the top above the masthead. 774,000 jobs. Keyamo again disagrees with Senate as Ngige apologizes. The story starts from the front page and it continues on page 6. On page 19, Kwara Governor's Chief of Staff dies of COVID-19. Below the masthead, US begins formal withdrawal from WHO. That story is on page 3. On page 4, enough is enough. Reopen all churches now, can tell state governments. Senate passes sexual harassment bill. See the story on page 2. And the lead story on Nigerian Tribune says Magus probe creates uncertainty in EFCC. The kickers, presidential probe panel sitting enters day 2. Presidency mob on his reported suspension. Anti-corruption chief moves belongings out of office. Security operatives search his house. He must be treated fairly. This is coming from Serap. He must be sacked now, says coalition of lawyers. The story can be found on page 3. Beside the picture, no face masks, no exams. This is coming from WAEC. 1.55 million candidates to sit for the exams. The story can be found on page 4. On page 7, Ondo Assembly serves Deputy Governor impeachment notice. 9 lawmakers say no. On page 27, Senate wants Ibadan Airport renamed after Ajimobi. The picture here says Regional Bank Head, Southwest One Fidelity Bank PLC, presenting the personal protection equipment donated by the bank to Ondo State Government to the Chairman Ondo State COVID-19 Response Fund in Lagos on Tuesday. With them is a member of the Ondo COVID-19 Response Fund. And the last story on Nigerian Tribune. Reps to probe NNPC over $1.05 billion illegal withdrawal from NLNG account. To probe Labour Minister over suspension of NSITF management. The stories can be found on pages 26 and 27. We move to Business Day newspaper and I'll take it from the lead story. Overwhelmed by COVID-19, Nigerians face food crisis over disruptions to planting season. The kicker, Indorama shutdown has affected fertilizer availability for 2020. This is coming from NSIA. The story starts from the front page and it continues on page 29. Beside that, Lagos needs to invest in 3-leg transportation system to become competitive. This is coming from experts. US-based experts recommend use of mass transit, train and ferries. Aibogu blames policy failures for personal traffic congestion. I take that again. Aibogu blames policy failures for perennial traffic congestion. The story starts from the front page and it continues on page 29. The last story, inside story. UBA Group announces appointment of deputy managing directors for Nigeria and Africa. Story can be found on page 28. Alright, we'll move to sports now. Results from yesterday's matches. England Premier League. Crystal Palace 2, Chelsea 3. Watford 2, Norwich City 1. Arsenal 1, Leicester City 1. Italy Serie A. Leeds 2, Lazio 1. AC Milan 4, Juventus 2. Russia Premier League. FC Tambov 1, FK Akhmat 2. Arsenal Tula 2. Krylia Sovetov Samara 4. And finally, Spain La Liga. Valencia 2, Real Valladolid 1. Celtic Vigo 1. Atletico Madrid 1. Alright, with that sports update, we come to the end of today's show. This is where we say our goodbye on today's edition. Thank you for watching. You can do us well by joining us for a fresh edition on Friday. Till then, I leave you with this. Wisdom is knowledge that is guided by understanding. We need to have wisdom and knowledge to understand why certain things happen in our lives and trust that God will lead us out of any obstacle that come our way. Remain blessed and bye for now.
Why do we fall ill? Is it possible to stay without falling ill? Is God interested in our health? Can we get access to cheaper health anywhere? Do you want tips on how to stay healthy? Then join me, Angela Weze, on Healthwatch every Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. with repeat broadcasts on Thursday at 2 p.m. and Saturday at 1:30 p.m. as health experts provide answers to your questions on how to remain healthy physically, mentally, socially and spiritually here on. God bless you.
How do I get tested? If you fall into any of these previously mentioned categories, remain in self-isolation and immediately call your state hotline or the NCDC toll-free line on the screen. The State Ministry of Health, supported by NCDC, will arrange for sample collection and transportation to the lab. Where can I get tested? There are several labs across Nigeria for the testing of COVID-19, and these labs are currently rapidly being expanded